Even during the pandemic, I didn't have to shut down. I didn't have to lay off anybody. Even when I took my gap year, I didn't have to lay down. Everybody still had a job. Everybody still got paid. So I thank God for that. And that all of that comes from making good financial decisions, because a lot of people, unfortunately, when they don't realize that business has ebbs and flows. Some days you're going to be up, some days you're not going to be making the same amount of money as you were, especially when it comes to like fashion. Trends change, the market changes, the economy changes, right? We went from 2020 and 2021 to everybody having all of this excess money to now 2025 people are penny pinching, right?
Yeah.
So you have to adjust accordingly. You just have to adjust accordingly.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Jabir McKnight, and I'm your host of the Spark Podcast. And I'm joined by an amazing guest today, Zakia Blain, the CEO, visionary of FBF Body, and the professional overcomer. That speaks to me. I love that title. There's so much going on in the world. I think this conversation will really show and speak through what resilience looks like, what it means to build
Absolutely.
a brand, and what it means to build community. How are you feeling today?
I'm amazing. We're actually on set today. So you'll see me crossing my to make sure my models are getting the right shot that we need for our next drop. Today's an amazing day. It's a little cold outside, but it's good.
When is the next drop?
March 28th. So this will be aired well after March 28th, and we're praying sold out. Amen.
Amen. So we'll have to catch them on the next drop after that.
Yes.
That is great. What is FBF Body? What does it mean? And how did it come about? And why do you feel like it's important now more than ever?
Well, I mean, FBF Body actually stands for F being fat. I don't know if you found that out during your research, but
Mhm.
when we originally started, we started with a weight loss challenge, and it was basically to empower people to be proactive in their health versus waiting, for something to happen with them medically, whether it was getting diabetes or high blood pressure. Because, we often see people don't really start to make a change until something happens, until they're forced to. And so FBF was really built around, let's be proactive in our lives with our health and taking the reins on that ourselves, because we can really heal ourselves if we just put the time and the effort and pay attention to the things that we're putting into our bodies and doing to our bodies. I was diagnosed with a brain disorder almost 15 years ago, and I had to look at diet and exercise as a way to basically get off my medication and not heal myself, but make it more bearable to live with a disability that I'll have for the rest of my life. And so FBF is really to just empower people to live their best, most healthy lives while loving themselves and taking care of themselves at the same time.
So, reading up on that diagnosis, I know that your doctor did state to you that you couldn't work out anymore.
Well, that was a different diagnosis.
Okay, tell me about that one.
Listen, this is where we come. This is why I am called the professional overcomer.
Okay.
So I have arthritis in my knees, and back in 2015, 2017, somewhere around there, my doctor said, if you want to walk when you're 50, you have to stop working out. As strenuous as I was, not completely, but at the time, we were 3 years, 4 years into business. I was training every day, just ridiculous stuff, carrying, punching bags on my back, running up and down steps. I was just training like I was about to be in the Olympics or something, just ridiculous, and just tearing my body up. And people really don't talk about how actually overworking your body can actually harm your body as well. And so they say, if you want to walk when you're 50, and I'm knocking on 50 now, 4 years from 50. And literally I was just at the doctor a couple months ago after I took my son to the Super Bowl. my arthritis had started acting up. My knees were swollen, and doctor was like, and so I said, doctor, what do you think long term? He was like, you're going to need a knee replacement. And I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, there's that.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough news. And I think it definitely speaks to your point, the professional overcomer title. Like, what does resilience mean to you when you get news like that? Right?
I
Like
mean,
it
we
was
we
something that
keep it
was
going.
forecasted. Yeah.
We keep it going. We modify. Since that diagnosis, I'm still at 2 workouts a day. I wrap my knee. I research what are the best workouts I can do for someone with arthritis and a knee injury that are still going to help me build muscle. And then we just adjust accordingly. Instead of running, I'm going to get on the elliptical. Instead of, on the treadmill, putting that pressure on my knee, I'm going to go walk outside. I'm going to add a weighted vest that's going to, help with my heart rate. So we just adjust, we pivot, we don't stop. We just figure it out and we keep on moving.
I love that. I love that. Again, through all of the research and kind of reading through some of the things, two key traits that I feel like continues to shine through in everything that you do is one, authenticity, and two, the ability to just put one foot forward. Whether when that moment arises, some people feel like they have to prepare it, they have to be perfect. And what I've read in your story is once that opportunity is there, like you go for it. And that is a absolutely defining trait. Yeah.
It's funny you said put 1 foot forward. I actually have move forward tattooed on the back of my ankles
Wow.
for that reason, because we're not looking back. We're literally going to move forward every time something arises and may appear like it's a setback. But no, you have to keep putting 1 foot in front of the other to get where it is you want to go.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, that speaks to what it takes to be an entrepreneur. I'm sure what it takes to be a parent and raising kids, and just having your own personal life. So, can you talk to me about? I know FBF started with a T-shirt. You first had you had a challenge, and you were selling T-shirts, and then you
Yes.
transitioned into shapewear. I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was really interesting and important, when you had that moment and you identified that, okay, you use this particular shapewear and is extremely important, but you've cultivated this community and you're going to share this shapewear with the world. And it's like, whoa, let me take a step and really recognize my level of influence and the opportunity that's presented in front of me and
Mm-hmm.
take advantage of that.
Right.
And I think it's important. Some people might say, okay, well, it's not just about business. You've cultivated the community. People are getting behind you, and you actually care about this community. So why not you? Tell me about that journey and like the trials and tribulations that came along with just sourcing shapewear and how important that was to get that to your community.
Well, this was right after the time that my doctor told me that I couldn't work out. And so, of course, after that, scaling back tremendously on my workouts, I started to gain weight. I'm one of those people who has to, work out actively to maintain my weight. And so when I wasn't being as active, I started to gain weight. I always say God made me get fat so I could get rich. Listen, you got to pivot in times of adversity. And so, I was traveling somewhere and I had purchased this shapewear and I had shared it on Snapchat at the time. And literally like 800 people had screenshot it. And I was like, okay, if 800 people literally are willing to take my recommendation on this, I need to also be selling this. Not just, you think it doesn't tie in to health and wellness, but it does, because you have so many people who in the weight loss community have bariatric surgery or have lost a lot of weight and they end up having a lot of loose skin. And so they use shapewear as a way to help them feel more confident when they can't afford surgery and to, keep everything tight under their clothes when they have lost 200 pounds and they have that excess skin hanging. That shapewear actually makes them feel comfortable. And
Love
so
that.
it was kind of a no brainer, right? And then also on top of that, People would rather, if you say this can make you look 10 pounds lighter, they want that instead of actually doing the workout. That's what I found, right? We were doing a weight loss challenge, which was what, $25 a month. And it was for 8 weeks, and you would get a cash prize. People didn't want to pay for that. But as soon as we started selling $60 shapers that could make you look 10 pounds lighter in 2 seconds, they were like, give it to me. Give it to me. And so I reached out to the manufacturer of the shapewear. I contacted them. I said, listen, I have this brand already. Here's our website. This is our community. I would love to partner with you and offer this to my community. They looked at our website. They saw everything was legit. They gave us an MOQ. That's a minimum order quantity. And we started with our first order of shapewear. And it really wasn't selling as good as I thought it was going to sell at first. And then I had this bright idea. One day I was in Atlanta, and it was my cousin's birthday, and we were getting ready to go out. And I said, let me show the people how this actually works. And this is back in the day of social media before what it is now, right? Everybody's getting dressed on camera. I am one of the originators of that. Not to toot my own horn, but I was getting dressed on camera way before everybody else, right? And so I said, let me show these people how it actually works, what it looks like. And once I started making videos showing people what the product did and how it actually worked, we took off in the shapewear area. And that was our first pivot in business from the weight loss challenge, because I couldn't really do the weight loss challenge anymore. But that was our first pivot.
How fast did you move on that gap between those screenshots on Snapchat to reaching out to manufacturers to putting the product out into the public? Like, how fast was
I
that
reached
journey?
out to the manufacturer the same day.
Wow.
The same day.
And
I
and you
literally I
already
was
did you already know who the manufacturer were? You researched all in that
I
same day and
researched.
reached out.
I researched to them that same day. It was a weekend, actually. I sent the email. I found out who the manufacturer was. I contacted their sales department. I sent them an email. By Monday, they had responded to me. And sometimes it's really that simple. Like once you find out who makes a product, you can find out who to contact to get it. And I remember my girlfriend told me this. She was like, if you want to know where a product is made, she was like, look at the box, look at the tag, go online. Somebody said the other day, what's a resource that many people don't use that is life changing? And I will forever stand on the hill of Google. Google is life changing, but unfortunately, people don't use it. They don't use it to their advantage. And literally, you can find anything on Google.
You're not lying about that. That is amazing. I know recently you were in China.
Mm-hmm.
How did that transition go from reaching out basically over email to, have a conversation with the manufacturer versus going to the source? Like, what
Well,
caused that transition?
our manufacturer for our shapewear is actually based in the United States. Our
Okay.
manufacturer for our active wear, what I'm wearing now, they're based in China. And so we went direct. I was having some problems with my manufacturer in China, and I wanted to see firsthand what the problem was. And actually sit down with them, but also at the same time, while I was over there, look for backup manufacturers, because we have been having so many issues with our current manufacturer that in business, you want to always have a backup, another manufacturer who can make the same products, or you'll be stuck in a situation like I am currently in now, where we are ending our active wear, not ending, but we basically ended the relationship with our manufacturer because of the issues that we were having. And even though we went to China last year, I visited up to 20 different manufacturers. They couldn't recreate our products at the quality that our customer was accustomed to. So instead of saying, okay, well, we're just going to pick anybody, I would rather just not do it at all. So that's where we actually are right now. And, oh, can we come and visit you? And can we do this? Sometimes you really have to stand on business in business, even if it is at a cost to your business. So thank God I'm in a position where I don't have to continue being in business with someone who doesn't have our best interests at heart, and sacrificing the quality that this brand has been known for over the last 13 years. It's really you pick up a phone, you call a couple people, and you catch a flight.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, like you said, standing on business and really understanding what's necessary in the moment. I'm thinking about, I think it was 3 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, when you went on a adult gap year, right?
Mhm.
Like you took a sabbatical really when, the business has been taking off, but this was directly after your 10-year anniversary, right? You have more momentum than ever, but you
Mhm.
realize that you needed a break. Tell
Mhm.
us about that journey before taking the gap year. Like, what were some of the feelings that you had? Did you feel like this was the right time? Were you worried about a initial drop off from the momentum that you had? And what was the deciding factor?
The deciding factor was really my mental well-being. Being an entrepreneur is not for the faint at heart, you know? It's long hours, highs and lows. You can make a lot of money, you can lose a lot of money. Business shifts from season to season, from quarter to quarter. It is a lot. Being an entrepreneur is a lot. And especially when you're an entrepreneur and a parent, right? And basically the sole financial provider for your entire family, it is a lot on your mental health. And again, also tying back, I am permanently disabled. And I think a lot of people forget that because I don't present as such and I don't have a visible disability. I have what is known as an invisible disability, right? And so my health is always top priority for me. And so when I see that my health is being affected by something, I have to step back. And thank God, I've made pretty sound financial decisions where I'm not somebody who has to worry of, like, I am fortunate enough to be able to take a gap year. We were still open, the website was still open, but I just wasn't as much in the forefront, being on social media all the time, doing all the marketing, doing all the things. I actually got other people to do it during that gap year. So the business was still running. We were still open. We were still making money during that gap year. We still hit over $1 million in sales, but I didn't have to be so forward facing in the brand. So, it worked out. It was good.
And how did you share that with your community?
I sent them
Did
an
you share
email.
that you were going? You didn't go on social media and post, and you just sent a newsletter?
No, I went on, we sent I make sure my customers are informed all the time. So we sent the email, we sent the text, we made a post on social media. So nobody could miss it. And I did an interview with Essence about it. So everybody saw it. Everybody knew what was going on. And, I continued to post, but I was only posting in my close friends on social and, just again, making sure that my mental wellness and my health was top priority.
Love that. And how do you feel that resonated with your community after the gap year when you came back? Did you feel like the community was more strengthened because of that authenticity that you've continued to show? Because, I mean, that gap year and you talking about your mental health journey and rejuvenating your wellness, I mean, you stayed ahead of the curve in so many different things. And I think even that conversation, everyone is having it now, but
Mhm.
you had it, a few years ago.
I think that my community was very supportive because I just had this conversation like last night. I am not so much of a talker but a doer. And so people are influenced by action, not by what you say. So by me deciding to publicly take a gap year and talk about it and the reasons why, it gave other people the opportunity to reevaluate their lives and look at that job that they may be working that they hate, that marriage that they might be in that they hate, or any part of their lives that is not aligning with who they are now and who they want to be, and reevaluate that and see how to, make changes. It gave people the courage to do that. I would get so many messages like, thank you for inspiring me. I did this, I got a new job, I went back to school. Like all of these things just by watching me and me showing up and doing exactly what I say I'm going to do.
I love that. The authenticity continues to shine through. Going back to, like you said, the get dressed with me or the get ready with me trend and being ahead of the curve there, I'm thinking about so many other brands. T comes to mind and how, they're pushing body positivity. Again, you've been doing that for like almost 15 years now. How does it feel to see your impact shining through on large brands like a Fenty? And how do you want to continue to move forward and greater impact with the work that you're doing?
I mean, where I'm at in the space that I am in right now is that I love that these other companies and brands are doing it because I'm actually tired of them. I literally just said yesterday, I was like, pick somebody else to do it. Like, I'll show up, I'll support, I'll lend my expertise, but I don't want to be the leader of the pack anymore. I want to sit back and enjoy my life and enjoy the fruits of my labor, because at what point is enough enough? Right. I know we all have these entrepreneurial goals and we all have aspirations and things that we want to achieve in our lives, and we make those lists and those goals. But what happened when you've met all your professional goals? What do you do then? What comes after that? If you're constantly adding a goal, a goal, a goal, a goal, a goal, when are you ever happy? When is enough enough, right? And so I'm at the point in my life where I'm good. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to lead the charge. I'll show up, I'll support, but I know that what I've done has had an impact on where the market is right now. And I'm cool with that. Like, I'm proud of that. And I can pass the baton to other people to lead the charge.
I love that. So it sounds like you're in your returning phase. At Dream Beacon, we talk about like three phases of life. You have learning, earning, and returning. That learning phase is
Hmm.
really is evergreen, right? You're doing that forever. But for
Right.
the most part, a lot of that is going to happen in the earlier parts of your life. Then you have to put the things that you're learning into that phase where you got to make money and making sure that you're secure. And then the back end of that is the philanthropic side. So
Yes.
how does philanthropy show up in your life during this current phase?
So for me, I give heavily to my church, to churches. I've always been a philanthropist. I like to give quietly. When I see people who might be going through breast cancer treatment or something of that, especially like who are a part of my community and FBF customer, I'll rally everybody together or I'll send them money. I've had customers or people that I follow that I see are starting new businesses and they might need a printer. Let me DM you. You want that printer? I'm gonna get it for you. Last year, one of my followers, she had an autistic son, and she was talking about how she needed these things for her son, and they were so expensive. I said, send me your Amazon wish list. I bought everything on it. Didn't tell a soul. So that's how I do philanthropy. I do it very quietly. I see people with need, and if God calls me to help them, that's how I help them.
Wow.
Right
I
now,
love that.
going this year, I'm volunteering my time to speak at over 50 schools and universities. So that is my philanthropic goal for this year. Also to give more money to my church, and actually, instead of just giving money, actually volunteering more with my church.
That. And when you're speaking at schools, I want to spend time talking about a few of those things that you talked about. So the school tour, schools and universities, what will you be speaking about at those universities?
So when I speak to schools, I have a program called the I Love Her Project, which is I go into middle schools. I do an assembly program where I talk about body image and self-esteem with young girls. As you mentioned, I was an educator. I was a middle school teacher for over a decade. And what I saw is that, middle school is the formative years for young women and young men. This is when they are learning about their bodies, when they are learning about who they are as a person. And self-esteem is really affected, and especially for young girls, body image. You have so many different outside pressures for women, period, but especially young girls. And so we talk about body image, we talk about self-esteem, and we just have a conversation. And I really focus on them loving themselves. Because if you ever ask a young girl, tell me 10 things you love about yourself, the first thing they're going to start with is something negative. That's not what I asked you. I've seen it over and over again. Tell me 10 things. Well, I don't like my hair. I didn't ask you that. I said, tell me 10 things you love about yourself. And you would be amazed at how hard that is, even for adults. And so that's really my focus when I go and talk to these girls in schools.
Well, like you said, I mean, it's formative years. It starts early. So I wouldn't be surprised by adults because it happens with kids, right? And if we never attack those things and work through them early, then they're going to persist. So I think that's extremely important work. I know you're speaking to universities as well. Is the topic similar, or is it a shift there when you're talking to a older audience?
Well, what I do is when I'm talking to any school, because like I said, I have the I Love Her project, which is specifically for middle school. But if I'm doing a university, I always ask, what is it that this group needs? Because I am so well versed in so many different topics, from, wellness to entrepreneurship to disability to domestic violence. Like, I can keynote on anything. So I really, like, I'm doing a keynote next weekend, and I said, what does your audience need? What do you want me to talk about? And so they tell me what they need, and I go from there.
I love that. I love that. And like you said, just thinking about this community engaging in philanthropy, you're an educator for over a decade. How did those skills shine through in beginning your entrepreneurial journey? Like, did you engage in entrepreneurship in any type of way as a teenager or childhood or while you were teaching? If not, like, that's not an easy jump for most people. That's not an easy jump for most people to just leave the classroom and do much of anything outside of education. For you to transition to a full-time entrepreneur, I would love for you to speak to our educators, which we have a lot of them. I have a few on my team, about how those skills transition, because they do transition. If you could stand up in front of a classroom every single day, you're kind of a superhero.
Absolutely. I always say talking is my superpower. But not only was I an educator, I was also a supervisor in finance at the time. I worked 7 days a week for 11 years, two jobs. So while I was teaching, I was also working for HSBC as a supervisor in their customer service department for private label credit card. So really, that is the job that prepared me for business, because the foundation of business is good customer service, right? And so by being in customer service for so long, when it was time to start my own business, I knew the foundations of, you know, how to speak to customers, what are the main points and pains in customer service, how to do my website. And also being an educator, I also knew that, again, how to stand in front of a group of people if it was time for me to sell something. And the funny part about being an entrepreneur is that when I was in customer service, we used to have to like sell insurance, right? Too, as an upsell. And I was like, I hate selling. Like, I hate selling. It's not that I hated selling. It was just I was selling something that I wasn't interested in. So I can tell you anything that I'm interested in because I'm a consumer, right? So I think that also helps in being an entrepreneur, being a consumer, seeing what catches people's eye. Like, for me, it doesn't take much for me to buy something if I like it, right? And I know that there are other people out there who are exactly like me. So that part of being working in finance, and so that also helped in business and actually like running my money. I never took a business course. Ironically, my picture is up at Temple University in their business school. I've never attended, but they have my picture in there as being one of their alumni in business. And so again, in Google, like you really just learn along the way. But for me, it wasn't about being an entrepreneur. I never started FBF thinking that it was going to turn into what it turned into. I started FBF to help people. And I think that when you have a service, we are put on here on this earth to serve. And when you have a foundation of service and purpose of service, it's not about you, it's about other people. And so, as long as that was my mindset, that I am really here to help people and serve people, that everything else that I needed kind of fell into my lap.
Wow. So you utilized the skills that you had in your previous careers. You leaned into those. I think something that you said that I think is extremely important is identifying like what you're interested in, like what you value and how that shows up, and not confusing that with doing things that you're disinterested in. I know you started out for the most part as a, solo entrepreneur, but as you've built this business, you've built a team. What team members and what did you prioritize in regards to skill sets and the people that you brought in to shore up what you were doing?
So here's team. Look,
Hey, team.
yes, I like that. Well, I like the one that's kind of like this, like shadowy one. I like that. I know, but I like that. I really like it. Can we use it though? Because I really like it.
Yeah, so I mean, there were things that you said you do really well, right? Which is
Mhm.
selling things that you're interested in, ideation, figuring out what the product is going to be, the market research portion. But I think for the audience here, there are some people that want to do everything, right? And
Well, I did do
sometimes,
everything.
yeah, at some point, right? But I think doing everything because you're starting with where you are. But at
Right.
some point, I think one of the things that you talked about, right, is there are things that that comes naturally to you. We all have
Mhm.
things that come more naturally to us, and we're in the best place when we can lean into those things
Right.
versus the things that we do because we have to do it or it takes a little bit more energy to muster up. I'm
Right.
wondering, what were those spots and how did you identify, what roles that you basically didn't want to do and building the
So
team around that?
for me, I did everything for almost 10 years. It was just more cost effective. People are expensive. And if I can keep a dollar, I'm going to keep a dollar. I don't think I really like started calling in people until it was time for me to go on sabbatical. I mean, we have our own customer service team. I realized years ago that I didn't want to handle customer service anymore. As someone who had came out of customer service for so long, I did not want to handle the emails or that part of it. So we've had somebody in customer service for 6 years. Marketing, email marketing. I think I stopped doing that maybe 5 years ago because I would still even do my own email marketing, create the list, everything. So I stopped doing that about 5 years ago. I stopped doing my like photo marketing, and actually like right now I can do this because we're on set, but somebody else is taking care of what's actually going on. I just need to approve everything. But even before, I would be the one on set doing everything. So I think we've probably been doing this for maybe about 2 years. Who else? Social media team. I hired a see, here's the thing. The thing is, we often think we need all of these people to do a lot of things, and sometimes we end up wasting money. So, like, I hired a social media team, spent thousands and thousands of dollars. And what I learned is that my authentic content did way better than me hiring other people to do it for me. It was a lesson learned, right? So, the basics now, I have people who, are at my warehouse. I don't have to go to my warehouse. So, my son is my warehouse manager. So, they're there. And yeah, it's a small team. I don't have a lot of people who work for me. It's really like 10 people, but they're not even. I have somebody who runs my Facebook ads. I have somebody now who does my email marketing. I have somebody who does my customer service. I have somebody who does my e-com. But even with that, I create all of the marketing, and then I just tell them what I want,
I
and
love
then
that.
they execute. So,
The
but
importance of knowing your business in and out.
yes, knowing my business, and then I have my accountant, have my lawyers. Those are the main things. I have my financial advisor. But other than that, I'm real. It seems like now I don't do as much, but I really kind of do like all the behind the scenes stuff. You know what I mean? I'm the one approving samples for clothing and deciding what new designs I want and all of that. Like I'm very much hands on into all of that.
Okay. And for, young women that are out listening to this podcast, and that want to take that first step forward to starting a business, what are the key considerations that you feel they should think of before getting started?
Well, how is your product going to change lives? Right? We came into this area of the fitness, right, area when nobody else was catering to plus size women. And plus size women were looking for clothing that they could wear to the gym that was just as cute as smaller women. So, like you said, these brands are just starting to hop on the bandwagon. We've been doing this for almost 15 years now. So, and that was because I was a plus size woman. I was in the gym. I knew what was lacking. And so I solved the problem, right? So what problem are you solving? What does your business or product, how does it help other people? And then you need to figure out who is your audience? Who is your target demographic for this product? How old are they? Where do they live? What do they look like? Where do they work at? Right? So FBF, when we first started, everybody thought our brand was just for plus size women, right? Because I was a plus size woman. I was the main person presenting the brand. And so literally everybody thought it was just for plus size Black women specifically, right? And so I had to really change that. Once I saw that people were only associating me with plus size Black women, and I wanted to be an all inclusive brand, yes, I am a Black woman. Yes, I was plus size at the time, but I wanted everybody to feel comfortable in FBF. So I had to start to change the imaging and the branding. So instead of just me being a model, I had to call in people who were smaller than me to show the product as well, right? I had to
Mhm.
bring in diverse models so that it's not just for Black women. This is for women, right? Women of all sizes who want to feel comfortable, be cute, who are prioritizing their health. That was changed by branding and messaging. And so now, like we're shooting right now, we have two models, one's in a small, one's in a 2X. So we are constantly presenting what we want potential customers to see. So as someone who is just starting out, you have to figure out what your core audience is going to be, and then you can decide how your marketing is going to speak to them. So those are the first two things, right? When you are starting a business, like, what are you selling? How does it solve? And who's buying it? Because until you know that, you don't know how to market it and or sell it. So that's the first things. And then you can,
Okay.
start with the website but you have to know those things because then that determines what your website is going to look like, how it's going to feel, right? What colors are you going to use? What your logo should look like. All of those things come after you figure out how your product is going to help people and who's going to be buying it.
I love that. Starting with why, everyone. You have to start with why before
Mm-hmm.
you focus on all of the bows and all of the other beautiful things that make it come to life. In
Right.
regards to financing, did you bootstrap FBF?
I started FBF with $75 in a favor.
Tell us about the favor. So from 75, what does that jump look like, right? Like from 75 to getting that first drop to elevating it from there. I would love to hear like that raw early portion of the journey because people don't know. You might be like you said, it's different now, right? Even if
Right.
you're going to have quarters that are good, you're going to have
Mm-hmm.
quarters that are a little bit down, you'll be working in between, but at this point you're kind of have a better feeling of what the ebbs and flows are going to be. But while you were
Right.
still learning those necessary lessons and getting those bumps, what did that look like? When you're up 1 minute and then it's like, whoa, where did the money go?
Well, it's
I
never
would
been
love to
that
hear about
bad.
that. Okay.
But we started FBF with $75. An ex of mine actually had a screen printing business on the side. And so I was like, I want to order these shirts. And I think I ordered $75 for 4 shirts was expensive. Now that I'm thinking about it.
$75 is very expensive, especially back then. That's like
Right.
2020 prices.
Exactly. I'm thinking he might have he was trying to scam me. I don't know. But I had the logo. I had bought like these baseball tees, and I wanted him to print the FBF logo on the front. And he did it. He made me 4 samples in like different colors. I think it was like a gray and a black, a red and a white, and something else. I don't know. Or maybe just the gray and the black. Maybe I just made 4 of those. I can't remember. But now, mind you, before that, we were doing the weight loss challenge. So, like, we were bringing in money from that because that was my intellectual property. We were selling that. So, I really started my business with nothing, which was just me sitting down, writing out a plan. But as far as like the apparel side of it, we started that with $75. So, he gave me the 4 samples. I took pictures of them. And this was when Instagram first started. And I don't know how old you are, how long you've been on the socials, but
Since Instagram started, I was
okay.
young, but I was on it.
Okay, so you remember like the little chalkboard, like what do they call it? Not a filter, but it was like that little chalkboard thing where you could like write the chalkboard. And remember we used to do like the squares, like the 4 squares, and like put the
Yep.
pictures in the 4 squares. So it was literally like a 4 square picture, and I had laid like the shirts down on the table. I took pictures of them. I put them in that 4 square thing, and I posted it on Instagram. And I was like, these are going to be dropping. Here you go. And so what happened was my cousin, so we made the t-shirts, and then I had went to Foreman Mills and I had bought some sweatshirts. And so I decided to cut the top off the sweatshirts and put the FBF logo on there. So it was kind of like, that little shoulder out moment or whatever.
This was actually this is a time capsule moment. Everything that you're talking, baseball tees and the cutoff at the top, you're bringing me back.
It was the shoulder moment. It had the FBF on it, right? So those were like the first 2 products, and like they were like selling because again, we had already had our core community from the people who were a part of the FBF challenge. They wanted something to wear to the gym that said, F being fat. And it was so catchy at the time. Mind you, this is 13 years ago. We could say those things, you know what I mean? It wasn't PC. It was like, oh, what's that? And that's how people felt, because that's how I came up with the name. Like, I was outside, it was hot, and I was tired of being fat. I was like, F being fat, like, and then I was with my homegirl, and I was like, I'm gonna put that on a shirt. So that's what I did. So my cousin was doing Selena Johnson's hair at the time. My cousin's a celebrity hairstylist. She was doing Selena Johnson's hair in Atlanta at the time. She had on the sweatshirt, and Selena was also on a weight loss journey, and she was also on R&B Divas at the time on VH1. And so she told my cousin, she was like, where'd you get that shirt from? And she was like, my cousin makes it. And she was like, I want one. And literally I sent Selena a sweatshirt like the next day, and some t-shirts. And she started to wear them on TV. So when she would do her confessionals for R&B Divas, she would have on a fuck being fat shirt. And of course, people were watching TV and was like, oh my God, I love that. Where'd you get that shirt from? Where'd you get that shirt from? And so me and my guerrilla marketing, I would be right on Twitter following the, whatever, when, this is back in the day when like we used to literally watch TV together on Twitter.
Yeah. So
And
you following the hashtag.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Oh, where'd she get that shirt from? Me. You can get it right here. Me. You can get it right here. Me. You can get it right here. And then people started to buy the shirt. And then I went out to LA. One of the members in my FBF challenge was a publicist, and the BET awards were happening, and I wanted to go to the awards. And she was like, and so I was like, I'm going to go. And she was like, I'll get you in every party that you want to go to. And I literally went out there by myself. I had my little FBF business card. They were black and they were like white with pink, and it said fuck being fat. And I would just like go to all of these parties and like drop them on the table. And like, of course, people was like, what's that? What's that? It says fuck being fat. Da, 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 da. And then at one of the parties, I ended up sitting next to Nina, and Nina was working for TMZ at the time, but she then transitioned over to E! News, and she would do red carpets. And when we transitioned into Shapewear, she would wear our Shapewear on all the red carpets. the Oscars, the Grammys, on TV, whatever she was doing. So, little guerrilla marketing goes a long goes a long way. But that's how we literally started. And I would literally just reinvest my money. But I don't think I made my first $1 million until like total, like not in 1 year, but totally like finally hit $1 million. That was like 2017. 2017 is when we hit our first $1 million in sales. So like after, or was it 2019? I don't know. It was somewhere around there. But that's after we started selling shapewear. And then right after that, the pandemic hit. So like right before the pandemic, 2019, we had did that 1 year alone where we hit 1 million. We had did like maybe $250,000 in sales that year. And then the pandemic hit. So now nobody's wearing shapewear anymore. Nobody's going outside, right? So then that's when we pivot. Well, we're already selling leggings, but our shapewear was always our best selling product. But then the pandemic hit, nobody could go outside anymore. And what did the people want to do when they were inside the house? They wanted to be comfortable. They were working from home. They wanted to be comfortable. Our leggings took off. So we went from doing $250,000 that year, and then everybody had, their stimulus, their PPP money, and all.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
people were, and I think we went from 250,000 to I think 1.5 million. Then the next year was 3 million, and then like 2023, when the economy started to turn down, it was like 2 million. So we were still doing, we haven't been under 1 million in 5 years. So even with the turn in the economy, and like I said, when things go up and when things go down, thank God we've still been able to, like, even during the pandemic, I didn't have to shut down. I didn't have to lay off anybody. Even when I took my gap year, I didn't have to lay down. Everybody still had a job. Everybody still got paid. So I thank God for that. And now all of that comes from, making good financial decisions, because a lot of people, unfortunately, when they don't realize that business has ebbs and flows. Some days you're going to be up, some days you're not going to be making the same amount of money as you were, especially when it comes to like fashion. Trends change, the market changes, the economy changes, right? We went from 2020 and 2021 to everybody having all of this excess money to now 2025 people are penny pinching, right?
Yeah.
So you have to adjust accordingly. You just have to adjust accordingly. Whereas though, you might have been ordering excess amounts of inventory in 2020, now you're like, nah, let's scale back. You gotta pay attention to the data, and let that kind of drive your decision making.
Very important. I want to talk a little bit about family, starting a business and really leaning into the professional overcomer status while being a mother. Tell me about like that journey. Were there any particular times where you're raising your kids and you're dealing with the stress of being an entrepreneur and just dealing with life, right? Because y'all want to box you in. It's not just entrepreneurship and it's not just parenthood, but like you're a person yourself. You have the things that you're dealing with personally and just going through your own journey. How did you navigate that? And what would be your advice to anyone that is in a similar position?
I mean, my motherhood journey is a little bit different for other people. I had to deal with domestic violence. I had to deal with incarceration. At the same time, presenting as if none of that was going on. I remember when my worlds collided. Literally, I was in Atlanta. I was about to go on stage for Mary J. Blige's Strength of a Woman festival. It was like her first one. I was speaking on the stage about capital and raising capital for your business. And literally, as I was going on stage, I got the call that my daughter's father had been arrested for murder. Literally, I'm literally walking on the stage. And my son called me and told me. And I was like, People will never know what my behind the scenes life looks like for real and the things that I have to deal with. But that moment for me, I'll never forget because it was literally like my two worlds were colliding. And I still got on stage and I did what I was supposed to do and then got off, called my daughter, made sure, everything was okay. But those are some of the things that I've had to deal with as being a mother. Also, while being a teacher, working, going to school, being an entrepreneur, it's been a not rough because I made sure my kids don't necessarily feel it, but it's been, it's been hard to navigate through that, but it's also made me a better mother because once I saw what it was I was dealing with, I chose to do everything on my own. I chose to separate myself from my co-parents because there's nothing you can do for me here. You know what I mean? Like, and so that was really the driving force in why I worked 11 years for 7 days a week. Why in my business, like my daughter's right here, right now. She's a marketing major at Morgan. And so she's getting on the job training. I take my kids wherever I go. My son works for me. I took him to China with me. I just took him to the Super Bowl. Like, I want them to see what this hard work looks like. And so then they are a little bit more appreciative of it because they see that their mother is actually working and making it happen for them. I went from being a teen mom who had all the, everything stacked against me. I got a brain disorder, right? Teen mom, lost my full scholarship to school. I had to pay for college by myself after having a full scholarship to Penn State because I got pregnant and decided to keep my son. Then his father went to jail when he was 1 for attempted murder. So he was not around for 6 years. I put myself through college. I worked. 11 years, 7 days a week, teaching and working. Then got laid off, was out on disability.
Wow.
Then, almost lost my home to foreclosure because I was laid off. And then I really had to take a chance on myself and my business. The way that I stopped teaching is I was on disability and my principal in the district said you have to come back to work or you need to retire. I went back to work because then I was like, oh, I have to go back to work. I have these kids. I have, we need insurance. I have this brain disorder. I can't just leave and I have these kids and, and I'm sick. I was newly diagnosed with my brain disorder and FBF had just started. We were probably like 2 years in. FBF started 2012. This was 2014. And, I went to work and they were like, Miss Blaine, you have to teach 3rd grade. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I was a middle school teacher. I was like, I don't like little kids. I'm not teaching them little kids. And I was like, I called my principal. I said, get my retirement paperwork ready. And I didn't go to work planning to retire that day, but I had to take a step out on faith. And I had this business that, again, was 2 years in. I wasn't making that much money, right? But God said, let me show you what faith looks like. And so it took that, single mom who's my daughter's father is in jail right now. Again, this was a couple years ago. He got arrested for murder. He's 20 years. So, put both my kids through college. And that's what faith looks like. That's what God looks
Walking testimony. A walking testimony for sure. I
like.
mean, I think everything that you said and, recognizing that those things happen and moving forward, speaking to, the earlier part of the conversation, but also understanding that those lessons learned kind of pour into everything that you're doing in your journey. I love that you spoke about making sure that your children are integrated into the work. One, so they see how hard you're working for them and making it happen, but they're also getting the lessons learned that how to build something,
Mhm.
what it takes to build something, what it takes to maintain something. And of course, I know your son, so I see him building something absolutely amazing right now.
Right.
I'm supporting, of course, but I think it's a blessing. And him and I talk about it all the time. I love this marketing campaign that you're doing. Like, what's your thought process behind that? And a lot of that comes from seeing the work that you've been able to do. So clearly, everything that you're saying, and I wanted to add that color for the audience so they understand that everything that you're saying, these things are coming to life in real time.
Mhm.
I see it. And if you all, whoever's listening, have children of their own, younger siblings, nieces or nephews, it's never a bad time to get them involved with the amazing things that you have going on because they need to see it. Whether that's going to
Absolutely.
purchase a home, have them walking with you so they talking to the realtor and they
Mhm.
understand what that
Yeah, when I
conversation looks like.
when I bought my second house, because we've lived in our family home, my kids weren't there. I purchased my first home when I was 25. So when I brought our newest home, they were right at the signing table with me. I
And why was it?
make sure my
Uh,
kids go everywhere. Everywhere, I go, whether it's vacation, whether it's work, buying a car, buying a home. I want them to see what that looks like. I also want my kids to know what it's like to speak for themselves. I'm very adamant about my kids will call me and mom, I didn't know. You call. You say this. You say that. I'm not going to be there to speak for you all the time. You have to know how to speak for yourself. You have to know how to stand up for yourself. You have to know how to say things where people take you seriously. My son would call me all the time when he was in college. Mom, they did. No, you go down there and tell them people. You know what I'm saying? You send that email. You formulate it. You get the right words and what you need to say so that you know how to speak to people and you know what things look like. Right now, we have rental properties. So I had my son doing showings. When people want to come see the house to do a walkthrough, you go do that. So you see what it's like to be a landlord and to do a walkthrough and what's important to point out when you're, showing people the house. And we got a new tenant in one of our rentals because my son took them through the walkthrough. All those things, like right now, my daughter, she's holding products. She's shooting with my photographer. So they, and I told her, I'm about to do this interview. I need you to pay attention to these photos, pay attention to what they look like. Make sure that they're good. Make sure you can start to see what looks good and what doesn't look good. You're a marketing major. These are the things that you're going to be doing. So I'm about to go do this interview. You pay attention. You get behind this. You sit right behind them and you pay attention to what's going on.
Love
It's
that.
very important.
And one of the questions I want to ask, and it's my last question, but I think is extremely important, is about the younger generation, Generation Z, which your daughter is a part of, your son is a part of as well. What do you most admire about this new generation, and what are some lessons that you also feel like the new generation has to hone in on? I think you spoke a lot about some of those lessons, but I would love to hear what you most admire.
Well, I most admire that they are ready to fight, okay? Like they are ready to get out on the front lines for the things that they believe in. And I think many of the older generation, we've been spoiled by the jobs that our ancestors have done. And we're like, if it's not directly affecting us, we don't really need to get involved. But when you see
Mm.
these kids out here, protesting on college campuses, getting arrested, leading the charge, that's what I most admire about them. Like they are ready to go. You know what I mean? Like they have their beliefs and they are ready to stand up for them. So that's the thing I most admire about them that I think that advice I would have for them is to actually go back to like books and research and not taking everything for face value. I think a lot of this generation, because they've grown up with so much social media, they've lost the art of actually doing their own research for themselves and actually like without using chat gpt, right? Like
Mhm.
going to school and not having your phone readily at your hand to answer a problem for you or having to write a paper without chat gpt, right? Those old school foundations of actually absorbing the knowledge and not just taking the first clickbait, thing that you see on the internet at face value. I just read a statistic that, 52% of adults in Philadelphia can't read. And as a teacher, someone who is a former educator, I've seen it firsthand. So when people can't read, they can't comprehend, right? And some people who can read can't comprehend. So I think with this younger generation that they, that old school, like, just do your research, get as much knowledge as you can. I'm a lifelong learner. Like you said, you got to know the learner, the earner, returner. Like, I am a lifelong learner. So learning makes me happy. Getting that knowledge and that information, because that can take you so much further, and it builds your confidence. When you are knowledgeable about things and you can walk into a room, you're not self-conscious because you might not be able to participate in the conversation, right? You're not self-conscious because you might not know what this new thing is. So just educate yourself.
I think that is huge. Like you said, to not only be able to research, but also to be able to identify what's important and what's real, right? We've grown up in a generation where we're inundated with information,
Uh-huh.
whether it's targeted ads or, like you said, clickbait titles, which most people don't even look past the title or actually read
Right,
what's going on, right?
right. Or make sure it's from a valid source.
Exactly. Those small things. So how I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think you're touching on a very important topic, right? Especially when you talk about the strengths versus some of the opportunities to grow. A fighting generation with struggles to critically analyze what's actually going on. That is actually a very peculiar mix because you might not know what you're fighting for.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Or you might know what you're fighting for. You might know what you're fighting for, but you don't get the full picture or you misdirect it.
Exactly. And so that is like a ticking time bomb, right? Because we have so many of these kids, especially now, like I said, who are willing to go to bat and stand up, but you standing up on misinformation. You're not even standing up for the actual fact. Those two things together are a ticking time bomb. So, like I said, on one end, it's like they're ready to stand up, but then it's like some of them don't even really know what's going on and can be led astray by misinformation. And again, that power that they have of being ready to, protest and stand up is misdirected and misguided.
I think that's extremely powerful. And that's why I want to thank you for having this conversation. And this is why, I strive to have conversations, intergenerational conversations like this. I think, the power has been, and forever will be in having a connection between generations, right? Because there's always a new way to do things, right? And a lot of that comes from to a lot of the points that you spoke about standing the person wholeheartedly, whether you're a consumer or you're an activist or you're an educator, you have to understand what's going on in the environment to effectively get the outcomes that you're looking for. But for
And
you to
make
also
well-informed
do that
decisions.
and to make well-informed decisions, but you have to understand how things were built. You named
Uh-huh.
something, I mean, you said something that was important, right? Early said past generations, may have rested a little bit lean too into the laurels and the things that people ancestors had built, but the knowledge of what the ancestors had built was there.
Right. Exactly.
We need a little bit more of that.
Uh-huh.
So I thank you for being a part of that, and I do hope that our audience receives it, the right people receive it, and they amplify it. Thank you so
Yes,
much for
absolutely.
joining.
Thank you. This was amazing. Thank you for having me.